Well, my biggest hope for this TV series is that families can watch this together because it appeals to young people, it appeals to older people, and you can share a historical educational experience. Hopefully, younger people will become more fascinated with history and become more interested in history and realize that history is really about people more than it's about events. And the people are just like we are. And therefore, it's very easy to connect to them and then explore the whole idea through the documentaries and say through books and through other things by doing research online to find out more about these people and begin to really understand the fascination of history, the history of the human race, the history of people, the history of culture, the history of politics, not necessarily the history of events in a chronological order, but the real deal. And I'm hoping that this will get families to talk about history, get kids to talk to their parents, the parents to talk to kids, make more visits to the museums, make more visits to historical sites, and be able to relate that to their everyday lives. I think modern history, which is basically the 20th century, is very important for young people today to understand that the events that their parents lived through and their grandparents lived through actually have an effect on why the situations, the politics, the world, everything that's going on today exists. And it's a direct result of what happened. There was a large revolution that happened in the turn of the last century, and both in technology and also in thinking and culture, politics, which we are still living with today in a very profound way. And I thought that is a very, those 25 years, the first 25 years of the 20th century are a linchpin in terms of understanding history and what is actually going on today. These DVDs are really meant for 6th graders through 12th graders, and possibly even college students, but mostly it's high school and junior high school students, middle schools, that these are designed for. And hopefully it's a way for the whole family to be able to sit down and watch a TV show and get into conversations about what's true, what's not true, did it really happen like that, and then watch the documentaries and see what the real story was, and be able to compare it and also be able to have a relationship with the main characters who are the historic figures in the episodes. Well, we wanted to keep the show as accurate as possible so that one of Indiana's assets is that he speaks many languages, and how he got to learn all those languages was part of what the TV series was about, which is he visited all these countries and he had a knack for language, and so wherever he visited, he picked up the language. And I wanted, again, the show to be very accurate and people to speak in their native tongues rather than having everybody speak English. Rick McCallum and I wanted to come up with a different look for the series. We wanted it to look like features. We wanted it to look very European. We wanted to have a very high style to it. And so we just decided to, in the most part, hire foreign directors, which had never been done before in an American TV show. So to get a different point of view of what we were doing in history, to make it a more international portrayal of history rather than just an American point of view. And I think it allowed us to also bring out a lot of the qualities in the characters and in the situations that we wouldn't have gotten otherwise.
There's a much larger audience who can actually see the series. At the time that it came out, it was time shifted all over the place when it was first shown on network television. So it's a great place to actually see the episodes beautifully re-enhanced, sound all completely redone. But also, there's a fantastic history lesson in all of this. There's a wonderful timeline that takes you to the period where each episode takes place, plus all of the characters that you can meet and learn more about. There's some stunning, really remarkable documentaries that have been made about each one of the characters. So if you get interested in the story that takes place with Indiana Jones, then you can explore each of the characters that are in there, and you can learn more about their life, about their work, about their art, all of the things that made them the unique people they were. One of the things that George always tried to do was Indy is just a person who's next to history. He's just viewing it. We get to view it through his eyes. And he meets some truly remarkable people. But they're all normal people. You know, they're all people just like you and me. And that's one of the things that he wanted to impart, that, you know, you may be famous, you may be deeply talented, you may have this huge place in history. But basically, you know, he wanted to understand where they came from. And the DVD gives you the opportunity to understand the time that they lived in and see the documentaries that revolved around the history that was taking place, some of the events that were taking place in terms that created the art or created the person, and why they had so much impact on history. And that's what I think is unique. I don't think that's ever been done. The more you get into it, the further that you can go in the DVDs, not just with the timeline, where you can explore everything that's happening around the world historically, but also specifically you can generate it towards the subject that you just watched. So again, you can learn about Picasso, you can learn about Cubism, you can learn about Braque. That is something I think old teachers have yearned for. How do you get people interested? How do you get them focused? How do you get them concentrated? How do you make learning fun? And that's what I think the Young Indiana Jones DVD does more than anything. It makes history fun, and it's an experience that families can enjoy together, and that's very rare. Well, I feel deeply passionate that everyone should have the opportunity to see it. But I mean, I'm mostly concerned with young kids, teenagers, and teachers having the opportunity to be able to actually show this in schools. And I think it's a perfect thing for young family to actually sit and watch together. It's a very important thing now, you know, that everybody who's young gets an understanding. And this is just the first steps into teaching and getting people interested in history, because we've learned just in the last 8 years that history is a very important thing. We have to understand why we got into Iraq, why we're there, how did it happen, what's the history of why it happened, where did the United States make a mistake. All of these things are part of the history of a moment in time. And I think what happens with Young Indy is you get to see the beginning of the 20th century, both in 1908 and 1916 to 1918, the most extraordinary moment of the last century, and you get to see all of the events that take place and that conspired to create this extraordinary century that we had in the last 100 years.
Must. Must. Look at him! Eddie! Give me your mask! Give me your mask!
I can't.
On the wall! They're not attacking! Very well!
What in hell's name is that?
I don't know.
Mother of God!
Reverence for life. Everything I am or I ever shall be stems from it and leads back to it.
But what does it mean?
You value your life? You want to continue to live?
Of course.
That's the most fundamental trait of awareness one you share in common with all living creatures, the desire for further life. The thinking man looks into his heart and he recognizes this truth. I'm life which wills to live, in the midst of life which wills to live. Look around you, soldier. Life is everywhere. It creeps, it flies, it writes symphonies, it builds cathedrals, but most of all, it wills to live and go on living. The thinking man gives every life the same reverence that he gives his own.
But sometimes taking life is inevitable. To eat, I have to hunt. To survive a leopard's attack, I have to shoot it.
If you want guidelines, you've come to the wrong place. Reverence is a state of mind, not a set of rules. All it requires is everything be done in deep awareness. Good is whatever promotes life. Evil is whatever destroys it. From there, you make your own decisions.
You're on, you damn bastard! You'll never beat me! Fire! Short on the ramp! Damn you! You're coming too fast!
What of the child?
He can't come with us. I'm sorry. The Major was very specific.
Major Boucher is very bad, very evil.
He's trying to do what's best for all the men, including you.
Killing the boy is best for Barthelemy? Make me a better soldier?
That's not what I meant.
Major Boucher only cares what's best for Major Boucher. Only cares for what's best for his people.
He cares about your people, too. That's why he's here. That's why we're all here. To get the Germans out of Africa so your people can have a future.
Captain Indy, you're a very good man. A kind man, but not a very smart man. Belgians are not here for my people's future. Belgians are here for white people's future. When this war is over, will the Belgians go home, leave Africa to my people? No! The Belgians want to own African soil. Same as the Germans. No difference.
How can you say that? You're a sergeant in the Belgian army.
Belgian white man came and took me from my village and made of me a white man soldier. Took all young men to be white man soldier. My family is hungry. I'm not there to feed them. I'm here, fighting your war. Maybe going to die. When war is over, Africa still not belong to my people. You cannot make a future for my people, Captain. Belgians, France, Germans, all the same. Here is my people's future. Every child, if he grows strong, if he grows wise, someday he will make a future for my people. Not be a white man's soldier in white man's Africa, but a black man, an African man, in his Africa. You savvy me, Captain?
What you have are thousands of wounded in no man's land. And if you receive the proper kind of wound where you don't bleed to death, but you starve to death, you can remain in no man's land screaming for 7 or 8 days, usually screaming for help. And of course, if you're in a PALS battalion, this is one of your best friends that you've known for years out there screaming. And there's one word that each side learns in the other side's language, and that word is mother. Because that is who a 19-year-old kid who knows he's dying for the 4th day is going to scream. He's going to be screaming for his mother. And eventually, over time, this gets to both sides, the fact that there is this pitiful moaning and wailing coming up from no man's land.
The Ottoman Empire once spanned 3 continents, stretching from Budapest to Basra to Algiers. Founded around 1300, it created a rich, multi-ethnic world that was Islamic in faith and tolerant in practice. But by the early 20th century, the empire was under attack from without and challenged from within. When World War broke out in 1914, the Ottomans had to choose sides. They cast their lot with Germany and Austria, and against Britain, France, and Russia. That decision would lead to the empire's final destruction and the creation of the modern Middle East.
World War I was the most important political event in the history of the Middle East. And if we look at the Middle East today, we can see the after effects of the First World War up to the present time.
World War I was a catastrophe for the Middle East in the sense of famine, in the sense of redrawing boundaries. in the sense of ethnic cleansings that took place during the war and after the war. So in all, it was the major defining experience of the Arab world and the Middle East of the 20th century.
To the outside world, the Congo seemed like a perfect colony, profitable, productive, and civilized, all thanks to King Leopold. Meanwhile, inside the Congo, things went from bad to worse. When the rubber workers inevitably collapsed from exhaustion, starvation, or disease, the Force Publique shot them and were ordered to cut off their hands.
The Force Publique were issued with bullets, and the officers who were commanding these mercenaries wanted to see results. So for one of these soldiers not to get punished, if he was sent out with 10 cartridges, he had to have 10 hands of his victims. It's proof that he hadn't wasted his bullets. Often, of course, some of these bullets had been wasted, so there was this extraordinary pictures you get of living Congolese who, while they were still alive, had had their hands severed. Leopold set new standards in colonial brutality. I think he did that because he just was a man in a great hurry, and he didn't think of the Congolese as human.
Few statistics were collected at the time, but estimates put the total number of murdered Congolese at well over 10 million.
In 1953, Albert Schweitzer won the Nobel Prize for Peace, and magazines and newspaper articles were calling him the greatest man in the world. But he was one of the most unlikely candidates for such accolades, having spent the majority of his life working as a doctor, tending to the poor in a remote corner of Africa.
Albert Schweitzer went to Africa, and through 2 world wars and all of the uncertainties of life, he stayed. He didn't go home, but he stayed right there, working and working and working with the African people.
In addition to being a doctor, Schweitzer was a concert organist and a respected theologian. But it was for uncovering a simple philosophy that he won the Nobel Prize. He called his way of thinking and living reverence for life.
It's a wonderful philosophy because it sounds so easy, so simple. Almost everybody can subscribe to it, whatever their faith, whatever their background, whatever their color. Almost everybody does actually revere life.
Reverence for life was an attitude, and to know Albert Schweitzer was to understand what it truly meant to revere life.
We had this also wonderful period where just all this exciting talent came to us that not that we discovered, but that was out there that just really wanted to be a part of the series. Catherine Zeta-Jones, Lucas Haas, Anne Hesh, Daniel Craig, Elizabeth Hurley, just wonderful, wonderful actors and actresses. And it was just it was a complete and utter joy to work with them.
The ploy behind the ploy. You are under attack by a skillful illusion. A few artillery pieces lobbing shells, men and horses kicking up dust. A trick.
These demands are somewhat problematic. But not altogether unjustified. Oh, I agree. But there are many in the Empire who would not. If I may speak frankly, there are those who would view these concessions as a betrayal, perhaps even treasonous.
Well, I think one of the things that was so important for us to make the attempt to go to all the countries is it was a way of showing people in America. I mean, America, I think there's 7% of the country has a passport, and it was a way of taking people to Paris, to India, to all these different countries so they could actually see real people and real events taking place in the real locations. That was a really big deal, and that was one of the most challenging aspects for us when George and I set up the whole template of how we were going to do Young Indy. But absolutely imperative that you got the feel, that you got the sense that you were in all of these different countries. When we went to Africa, it was so important to be on the river. So we had to build tents where we were shooting, and we lived there for 6-7 weeks, with all the animals around us, because that's what the story was about. It was about the environment. How do we protect the environment? And those things were absolutely just mind-blowing for everybody who was involved.